Hi guys. Today I want to talk about the tarot and the Bible. So I've met some people that think that the tarot is evil, and it's mostly because the Bible condemns divination. And I know that it is taught that basically whatever is said in the Bible should not be questioned in a lot of religions. I know it's a touchy subject, and I was actually kind of hesitant to do this video, but I feel like it's something that needs to be talked about because a lot of people have been killed in the name of religion, and we are in modern times, and I don't think people are really as religious as they once were. But there may be people out there that are still wondering, is the tarot evil? Is it going to bring me bad energy? And so I just wanted to provide my point of view and what I know about the history of tarot and its mentioning in the Bible. Let's get started. And I have my board here because there's a lot of details that I want to go into, and I just wanted it to make it more visual. One thing to know is that the tarot actually wasn't intended to be used for divination. It was actually originally made to read the current energy in the current present moment. It works by using synchronicity. By shuffling the cards, we basically create, in a sense, a random number generator. And the cards that come out then have a specific meaning for the intended audience or person that you're reading for. In tarot, it is taught that we have free will. So when you get a tarot reading or you do a tarot reading for yourself, it's supposed to be taken into account that you can always alter your path. And the cards are just showing you what the current energies are, maybe things that you are not aware of in the current moment subconsciously. And it's always good to take into account that you can alter your path, and that's what the tarot is supposed to help you to do. It's supposed to make you see that maybe things aren't going in the direction that you had hoped for. And so you can alter your actions because we have free will to basically change the outcome. Another thing I want to mention is that tarot didn't come out until sometime between the year 1200 and 1400, and the Bible was made somewhere around the year 500. So I don't really think that the Bible was specifically talking about tarot when they mentioned divination. I think they were more talking about fortune telling or maybe speaking with spirits. But yeah, that's another thing to keep in mind. The tarot is imbued with wisdom from an ancient school of thought in Egypt called Hermeticism. So as you can see on the Chariot card, we can see two sphinxes. We also see this sphinx with a pharaoh-like headdress on the Wheel of Fortune card. There was a Catholic priest in the early 1800s, and his name was Eliphas Levi. Eliphas left the priesthood to become a ceremonial magician, and he was a big influence on Western occultism and magic societies, including the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is the order that produced the Rider-Waite Tarot deck, which I just showed you, the main one that we see nowadays. And he did this after questioning the origins of his religion. He was an original thinker for the time, and he was actually imprisoned twice for heresy against the church. But he wanted to bring to light that there was this ancient knowledge that actually predated Catholicism. He had noticed that Catholicism seemed to draw a lot on these ideas. So this is a quote from Eliphas about the tarot. A prisoner devoid of books, had he only a deck of tarot cards, of which he knew how to make use, could in a few years acquire a universal science and converse with an unequaled doctrine and inexhaustible eloquence. The main source of Hermeticism is the Egyptian figure known as Thoth, and he was also called Hermes by the Romans, which is where the name Hermeticism came from. So some rumors say that Thoth came from Atlantis, and we have no records from Atlantis, so there's no way to confirm or deny this. But somehow he seemed to know things that no one could explain for the time. He taught the Egyptians about science, writing, art, mathematics, astrology, and philosophy. He also taught that there was one God and that God was inside all of us. So in that way, we are all connected. It's crazy if you think about it because ancient Egypt had structures and inventions that we still can't really explain or replicate to this day. Egypt had to have gotten their knowledge from somewhere. Who knows? Maybe it was Atlantis because as the myths go, Atlantis was a very advanced city as well. I'm gonna go ahead and make a timeline here for you guys. This was the time of Thoth. So he was revered in Egypt all the way from 6000 BC, even through the Assyrian conquest of Egypt, and even up until when Rome conquered Egypt. So it's a really long time, as you can see. The Romans actually respected Thoth a lot too. They preserved a lot of his teachings, and they associated him with their messenger god, Hermes. They also called him Hermes Trismegistus, which means Hermes the thrice great. So let's say this is 0, Christ. In the year 391 AD, there was a Christian Roman emperor, and his name was Theodosius. He issued a decree that outlawed traditional pagan teachings, and he ordered closing of temples all across Egypt. Egypt becomes Christian. So by the year 535 AD, the Bible was pretty much solidified, and it was considered the law of the region. Bible equals law. So the first 5 books of the Bible are known as the Torah. And this portion of the Bible is said to have been given to Moses directly from God. And for a long time, it was actually forbidden to write down the teachings of the Torah because they were afraid that people wouldn't understand the full message and they might end up misinterpreting it or using it for their own personal gains. So eventually they decided they had to write it down because they were afraid that this knowledge was going to be lost forever. And I want to go back to the Egyptian figure of Thoth for a moment, because some say that he was a deity that didn't actually exist as a person, but he is mentioned many times in ancient Egyptian teachings, and I don't know how a deity could have taught them all of these things. To me, it seems that he was some being that may not have been human. But a lot of people want to bring that up when you talk about Thoth. And I feel like if you're going to bring that up, then you also have to acknowledge that there is no archaeological evidence of a lot of biblical figures, including Moses. There isn't even archaeological evidence of the 10 plagues that are mentioned in the Bible. And another thing that historians have not been able to find is evidence of the Exodus, when Moses led the slaves from Egypt. And there actually isn't any evidence at all that there were even slaves in Egypt at any time. And Egyptians were one of the first civilizations to have writing tools. They kept history on many other things, so it's kind of odd. The first 5 books of Bible are the Torah. The Torah does contain some of the same knowledge that Thoth had taught. Thoth also taught that there was one God, and he taught that as human beings we could attain salvation and ascend this world. Thoth also spoke of a fall of man, and he explains the difference between good and evil. And his definition of evil was just anything done intentionally to either hurt ourselves or hurt others. And his teachings also go into how God created the universe. So the only reason we know about Thoth's teachings is because, again, they were preserved by the Romans. But there was a period of time when this knowledge was completely lost. And it wasn't all the way until the 1400s, like way over here. So it wasn't until the 1400s that Thoth's teachings were compiled and translated from Roman to Latin and distributed in a book. This book was called the Corpus Hermetica. So once many people read this book, they started getting into alchemy and astrology. That's why you hear about all of these magicians coming out in the Middle Ages. So this is also around the time when the first tarot cards were produced. Some people say it was the 1200s, some people say it was the 1600s, but it was around this time. And by this time, hundreds of thousands of indigenous and tribal beliefs had been stamped out by the Catholic Church. The Inquisition took place between the years 1184 to 1821. And that's pretty crazy because that's kind of like not that long ago if you think about it. And the Inquisition was a holy war by the Catholic Church where priests were sent out all around the world to find anyone that had any beliefs that went against the Bible. And they were basically given permission to torture, kill, pillage, and use fear tactics in order to enforce Catholicism on the world. So going back to the Torah, if you notice, the word Torah sounds a lot like tarot, and I'm going to write it out so you can see. I believe that the tarot was named this way intentionally in order to take back the knowledge that was used long ago for people to gain power. And it seems like it was created as a way to convey this knowledge without using words, and instead using pictures and symbols and numbers. That way this knowledge couldn't be twisted or distorted. So if you look at the High Priestess card, you'll notice that she is holding a scroll, and we can see the letters T-O-R-A. Traditionally, the Torah was written on a scroll. I think it still is in some places to this day. So the Torah is shown in the tarot. And if you look at the Wheel of Fortune card, you'll see the letters T-O-R-A. Depending where you start reading the word on this wheel, you can get 5 different words. So these words are R-O-T-A, which means wheel in Latin. We get T-A-R-O, which means tarot. We get O-R-A-T, which means speaks in Latin. And we get Torah, which is the law, because that's the actual meaning of the word Torah is the law. And we get Ator, which is the Egyptian goddess Ator or Hathor, and she stood for love. She was pretty much like the Egyptians' version of Aphrodite. So this is translated as love. So if you put these together, it creates a sentence. The wheel of tarot speaks of the law of love. The Torah is the book of Judaism, but even in many sects of Judaism, the last book of the Torah, Deuteronomy, is highly debated as to whether or not this was a part of the teachings that God handed directly to Moses. And modern scholars agree that this portion, Deuteronomy, modern scholars agree that this portion was mostly written by the Levites to reflect social and economic needs of the time. And the Levites existed around 600 BC. So this was before Jesus Christ. The Levites were a corrupt group of warrior priests that believed they were given permission by God to go around killing any sinners without any kind of trial or any kind of deliberation on the spot. And they had even been known to kill their own family members or members of their own tribe. In Deuteronomy, this is where we find the first text mentioning that divination is evil or that it is a sin. There are many other very questionable laws in this section, including the law about working on Sunday, the Sabbath, being illegal and punishable by death. There's another strange law about if 2 men get in a fight and one of their wives tries to defend them by reaching for the other man's genitals, then her hand needs to be cut off. So yeah, it's odd. The Levites once killed 3,000 people because the people were worshiping a statue of a golden calf. And this act of apparently defending God against idolatry is what gave them permission to practice their priesthood all across Egypt and Israel. And I can see why, because after they committed that act, imagine seeing a Levite around and you're still trying to practice your beliefs of your ancestors, and that's a really scary thought to think, man, they just killed 3,000 people over a cow statue. There's another crazy story that I want to share about the Levites. So apparently there was a Levite man, and he was fighting with his wife, and she ended up leaving to go to the next city called Benjamin. He followed her there, but when he arrived, he asked a farmer if he could stay with him, and the farmer allowed him to stay and basically said he could sleep with his daughter. So he took his daughter as a concubine. Later that night, the townsmen came to the farmer's house and started demanding for him to come outside. And for some reason, it says that he was afraid he was going to get raped or murdered. So they basically pushed the girl outside instead and said, just take her instead, because nobody cared about women back then, apparently. The men ended up raping her all night and in the morning she was found dead. So the Levite man was very angry about this, and he ended up cutting her body up into 12 pieces and sending one piece to each of the tribes of Israel, saying he needed their help for revenge against this town. And so they did go to war with this village, and they ended up killing everyone except for 600 men. So basically they killed all the women and children, I guess. Then they started thinking about it, and they realized it wouldn't really be right to just wipe out a whole tribe. So they decided to go into these other neighboring cities, and they found them 400 virgins. They had to be virgins to bring back so that they could repopulate their city. So yeah, it's a really weird story. I don't know. I'm hoping that it's like based on a lot of like symbology, because it just sounds really horrible. But yeah, I just find it very hypocritical that murderers are basically making laws for other people to follow. But at the same time, I can get why whatever law that they made, people were just like, okay, we're going to follow that. I'm going to make sure none of my family members are doing any of these things that they say are illegal, because I don't want any of my family members or my sons or my daughters to be killed, or my husband. So I could see why they would want to perpetuate whatever laws they were enacting at that time, because they were just very scary. And I think the whole thing about divination being a sin is because during this time, it was taught that only prophets could receive messages from God, or the high priest, and only like inside the temple. If people believed that they could get spiritual advice through other means, then it kind of took away their power. So when Jesus came, you can kind of see why he might have been sent during this time, because shit was just really bad. And when Jesus came, he was actually very critical of the leadership at that time. If you can remember, Jesus was actually persecuted by the Romans that had taken over Egypt. If you look at Jesus's teachings, he himself never actually said anything bad about divination. He never even really mentions that you have to follow the Bible. He basically says to listen to his teachings and watch out for false prophets, because people are going to be twisting words, and that you needed to think for yourself whenever hearing new teachings. He just advised his followers to only go through him to get to God, because he knew that his teachings were more pure. If you haven't read the Bible, I recommend reading the book of Mark, because this is where most of Jesus's teachings are written down. And it's actually very insightful to hear about the journey that he went through of being persecuted for just trying to spread love. It's actually very relatable, and I think about it a lot during hard times in my life. I do believe in Jesus, and I do believe in God also, but I just don't believe everything in the Bible. Believe it or not, Jesus is actually depicted in the tarot also. We can see him right here in the stained glass window, and he is there healing one of his followers. And God's name is actually in the tarot too. And if you don't know, it's sometimes called a tetragrammaton, because it's a 4-letter word. It has no vowels, so it's pretty much unpronounceable. But it looks like this in Hebrew, and it's actually meant to be read this way. It's also an angel. As you can see, people that made the tarot believed in angels. I don't know if you can really see it, but it's right here in his collar, if you look closely. And the letters are Yod, He, Vav, He. There's another card with an angel too. It's the Lovers. And this card also shows Adam and Eve, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life. So in conclusion, the tarot is not evil. Murdering people is pretty evil. I think it's time that we put this myth to rest. I mean, look how bad things got when this knowledge was lost all through the Middle Ages, when people were just being tortured and tried without hearings and just murdered just for their beliefs. I don't want people to be scared of it, because I really think that anyone can benefit from learning Hermetic knowledge along with learning the tarot. The tarot just helps you to see your life struggles from a different point of view. It allows you to see your blind spots. And I agree with the occultist Paul Foster Case when he said the tarot is a book disguised as a pack of cards. It might actually be the oldest book in existence. Alright guys, thanks for watching. My name is Amber. I post videos about history, psychology, occult and hermetic knowledge, and the tarot. I'm also a tarot reader. I'll put my link down below. Alright guys, thanks again for watching, and take care. Bye.